Welcome to the Forging Honor podcast. I'm Jonathan George.
And I'm Benjamin Jones. Here at Forging Honor, we explore what it means to live as Christian men. Along the way, we'll be doing challenges, building habits and character through action.
This week, we're doing a challenge check-in. Banjo and I talk about how we're doing with the current challenge, how living is going increasingly digital, the voyeuristic nature of especially social media, and about how we're currently consuming news, music, podcasts, etc. It is challenge check-in time. As a reminder, challenges last for 6 weeks. They are simple daily tasks to grow us as men, and the current challenge is to turn your phone completely off for 1 hour every day. Banjo, how is it going for you?
This week was a pretty solid week, not as good as the weeks before, 5 out of 7, as I recall. Spent a lot of time in the city of Pittsburgh. Had a lovely time attending a Pirates-Phillies baseball game. Go Bucks! And so I was experiencing the city life briefly, and I was kind of interested in that day, just noticing how much of city life in particular is lived on your phone. Maybe we can talk about that some. But just the way things are oriented now, I thought it was interesting trying to find that balance of how to use this tool of our cell phone, how that tool is changing and kind of growing exponentially in what it can and is designed to do, I guess. So, spending. I'm surprised at how much time I'm spending on my phone when it's not off. I think that's one of the things that's been interesting to see in this challenge. It's kind of something to think about. How has it been for you? How was it this week?
It's been going really well for me. Like I said, I switched to the flip phone after, not this last episode, but the one before that with John McCollum. And it's been awesome. So going really well. I'm 7 and 7, doing great. Or 7 out of 7, I should say. So going really well on that front. What's interesting, what I've noticed is I still have this impulsive urge just to browse something.
Right.
Like I want to browse literally anything. And so I catch myself on my computer going and pulling up various news websites or even my social medias I'm like naturally typing in, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And so that's been a fascinating thing where I'm just very conditioned to browsing. So I've installed a couple of, I think I'm going a little harder with this than the original challenge was definitely set out to be.
Sure.
But I think that's a good thing.
It's a challenge, right? You want to push yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm definitely pushing myself in this. And so I've installed several extensions. One that John McCollum mentioned about eliminating the YouTube recommended, I think it's called, I'm looking at it right now, the unhook, remove YouTube recommended. It just removes the entire recommended feed, and you can strip it down even further. So there's all these settings. So right now, if I go to YouTube, it's only videos, the most recent videos from my subscriptions.
Okay.
So it's very intentional about, and so I've enjoyed that. I've actually kept up with some of those a little, because I still want to go watch a video, but I'm not getting into the weeds of YouTube. It's more, this person I follow posted today. I'll watch their video that I specifically follow them. It also made me reconsider some of the subscriptions I had, people that were posting constantly, or just, it's like, why did I subscribe to them in the first place?
Right.
So I've trimmed that down. The other thing I did was I installed a extension called Newsfeed Eradicator, which now if I go pull up any of the popular social medias that have a newsfeed, say Twitter or X.com, you just see a little quote there instead of the newsfeed. You can still go search and find specific people. You can still go search and find specific topics. Same on Facebook, I could still use Facebook Marketplace, but the primary feed is not existent. Same with Instagram. I can still go look at someone's Instagram profile, but the primary feed is not existent.
Okay, so that extension, it eliminates the scrolling aspect.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's the idea behind it. You could still go use your social media. You can still post. You can still look at individual people's, like whoever you care to actually keep up
on
with.
your Instagram. Can you look at like story highlights? Is that still there, or is that part of the scrolling feed that gets
now
taken
if
away?
you went, you could go click. You could
On an
go
individual
search someone
person's-
individually, then
Okay.
click into their story. So if there's someone you really wanted to see what was going on, and you can set different settings for some of the apps. So anyway, and I'm sure there's others like it out there. So all that to say, it's going really well. But yeah, I know that there were a couple things you kind of wanted to get into. You mentioned the city, kind of living the city life. What did you notice in that? I have an experience from today, actually, that I could talk about. But what have you noticed?
I mean, maybe it's a little thing, maybe it's a big thing, but I've been trying to think through this challenge, trying to figure out, maybe what's the end goal with the challenge? Maybe what would this look like to be? I think maybe it was John McCollum made the point. What would be the universal application of this challenge? Was I think his word for it. And that's not always the best way to analyze if something is worth doing, but I think it is worth reflecting on a little bit in this case. So I'm trying to figure out, is the goal of this challenge, do we want to say, well, we want to eliminate smartphone use? And that would be my first choice. I would love to go back to a world of like payphones and internet cafes. Like that appeals to me. Is that realistic? I don't think so. So I think I have to kind of change my expectations on that. And I was kind of woken up to that this weekend, going to a baseball game, which in and of itself is like, I guess, a little bit of an anachronism in some ways in 2024, but I don't care. But as I was in Pittsburgh, I was at PNC Park. One of the things that stuck out is PNC had kind of this big sign at some point, the Pirates Stadium, and they said PNC Park is now completely cashless. And I thought that was really interesting. And everything now was either on your phone or on a credit card or something like that. So every kiosk, every restaurant, every shop now, I guess I didn't go into every shop, but I suppose the rule is you can't use cash, or at least you don't need cash. And everything is totally on a card or on a digital wallet. And I used a digital wallet, an Apple Wallet, myself, for the tickets. And I've used that a few times. And my first instinct with those is really frigid, really nervous. I don't know about you, JJ, but I really don't like using an Apple Wallet. I really don't like using anything where I don't have a physical copy. I really want to have something that I could hold. Like the idea, this is an aside, but like the idea of buying a digital copy of a movie is totally foreign to me. I cannot grasp that concept.
Have you not done that before?
I've rented,
like on iTunes?
I've rented a digital copy, but I've never purchased a digital copy. No.
Wow. I have a decent sized digital library myself.
So I would never do that.
Why?
I wouldn't do that because I would like to be able to access my copies at all time. I also think that the quality of the physical media is better. I would also rather have all of the equipment necessary for that. I would rather have
totally
the Blu-ray player and the big TV and those things. So the idea of buying something so that I can watch it on my phone, that doesn't appeal to me. That's not really interesting.
So that the reason I own a digital library is I haven't, like, in our marriage, we haven't owned a TV until very recently, and now it's an old TV that pretty much stays in our back room, and it's back here for when I have guys over and we're watching a game or something. But we don't really pull it out for movies. We have digital copies because we watch movies on our laptops or on our computer.
Yeah.
And so we don't have the setup for like a Blu-ray system or something. I definitely understand the appeal of that. And, I like physical copies of CDs for that reason. I have physical copies of most of the albums I own. Not all, because a few are really hard to find in physical form. So you have to buy the digital version. And there are certain legal reasons why buying a digital movie is different than buying a digital CD. Or or a digital album, excuse me, the your ability, like if you buy a digital album, you own those MP3s or WAV files or whatever you get it in, and you can burn it onto your own disc. So you could go buy a high quality disc, burn it on. You can't do that with a digital movie legally.
Right.
I'm not going to encourage people to find the ways that are definitely out there to do that. But anyway,
piracy is not a victimless crime, JJ. Not a victimless crime.
Hey, this isn't even piracy, legally speaking.
Just theft.
It's ripping. It's just something else entirely. Okay. Anyway, point being, I get where you're coming from. And yeah, the whole going full digital, like the payments, that really bothers me because I like cash. I like having cash. I like carrying cash.
Yeah, I thought it was funny to shift out of it to just say this whole place is not going to have.
Yeah, there's several places like that where I am. Most of the amphitheaters here, like I went to a concert. I went and saw Sting last year.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the year before. Time is flying, man. I went and saw Sting, and the amphitheater I saw him at was cashless. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. I do wonder what the legal precedent there is because, the cash is considered legal tender for all forms of debts. But I'm not sure. I don't know. Someone's going to figure that out at some point as far as the court system goes.
Well, I'm not entirely sure what the upside of it is. Maybe
it came out of COVID, is my understanding. Like it eliminated a form of
physical contact,
transference of physical transference of germs. Anyway, so I do see upsides to it because, having everything digital does allow you certain advantages in terms of speed and ability to do certain things. But so the example I've had is I go to restaurants now and there's the QR code. Like I went out to lunch. I was at work today in Nashville, and I went to lunch at a little pub there I like. They've got an amazing lunch special, fish and chips for $7.50. Comes with a drink, soft drink, not a fun drink. Point being, great deal. But the first time I went, I sat down. I'm like, there's no menu, so I just asked. And this was when I had my flip phone with me a couple weeks ago, and so I don't have a way to scan a QR code.
Right.
And I sit down and I just have to ask, like, physically ask the bartender, hey, what lunch items, what lunch specials do you have? So they had to tell me, and they were like, they're giving me that look. Why don't you just scan the QR code? But that was interesting. It required a little more human contact, and it required some rapid decision. I can't stare at a menu and go, oh, I'm going to compare this item and this item. I just have to go with what sounds good, right?
But you can if you do the QR code, right?
Yes, if I had the QR code, but I didn't have the ability to use the QR code. Is my point. Like,
so
those are everywhere now at all these restaurants,
right? Yeah, and I've had that experience too. This is what I think is odd. There's an assumption that's being made that everyone has a smartphone, which is not technically an incorrect assumption. But
it's a solid number, but I'm not sure if it's even above. Here, let me look this up real quick. How many people in America?
Well, I know that I know that there are more people in the world who have smartphones than there are people in the world who have toilets or have access to working toilets.
Wow. That's actually an insane statistic.
What? That was certainly true. I did a paper on this when I was in high school, and that was the case. I think it was like my sophomore year of high school. But I imagine that number has only grown since then.
I did not like the whole concept of having access to like first world electronics before you get first world plumbing.
Right.
So I just looked this up. Forgive me, listeners. You probably heard my typing on my clacky keyboard here. It's anywhere from 85 to 90% of American adults, I should say, own a smartphone. So there is a not insignificant number of people that do not own a smartphone.
And I think that's worth pointing out because if we make the assumption that everyone who comes into an establishment has a for example, like what if we said, what if we made church, this is an extreme example. I don't think anybody would really do this, but let's say that a church said, we're going to go completely paperless, right? When you come into our sanctuary, we'll have a QR code on the pew and you scan in, and that's how you get access to the bulletin. That's how you get access to the liturgy. That's how you get access to the maybe to the offering plate. how does that change, do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, people
worship?
do that with tithes already. People
Yeah.
do that with tithes already, where you can scan and tithe. And I've seen the ability to get a QR code to pull up your bulletin before. Not any church I've regularly attended, but like it's definitely a thing, and I am certain churches are doing that. If they even use a bulletin, a lot just kind of go by, display on the screen. If their church has one. So what I see there, because there are families at my church that will use their iPads as their bulletins, because they can access the bulletin is published on Saturday, the evening before. So folks the idea being, you can come, you can read the passage that we'll be going through.
Right.
Or you
Look
can
at the hymns.
review the songs if you don't know them. Yeah, exactly. And some folks take that, put it on their iPad, and then they use their iPad. What I've noticed is most of those folks are also answering texts and emails during the sermon. So,
right. Well, I mean,
I think it's just entering into distraction.
Well, it's so
there
hard.
are other tools that they could use, but it's inviting that opportunity, and I just think that's unwise.
It's so
I don't know
hard
if it's necessarily a sin, but it's unwise.
It's so hard to use a device for multiple things. I mean, it's so hard. I find this for myself. It's so hard for me to get work done on my laptop because it's the same place that I watch YouTube videos. It's
absolutely that's a thing. That's been a studied phenomenon.
And those wires get crossed as soon as I'm on this place. I want to go watch YouTube. I want to go watch Netflix, and sometimes I'll cover it up by I'll try to do both at the same time, and everything suffers for that. And so there's a part of me that I really just wish I could have one thing. So that's what my writing this last month has been, is kind of alongside this challenge. My creative writing, I'm only doing either with pen and paper or with my typewriter. And I have some online writing.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's been really great. I think I've been much more productive, even in, I think it's been assisted by some of those ritual things that we talked about in our last challenge. Even kind of like that feeling of putting the paper in the typewriter and shifting it into place. It does something different. But I'm interested in what does it mean? And this gets into, and I think we talked about this some with Ben Schoons. Some of the medium is the message stuff with the iPhone. How is what is being communicated through the technology of a smartphone? How does that change our interaction with it? And how does it change our interaction with other people? Like, I'd be curious, JJ, do you when you do you call family on your smartphone? Do the full FaceTime thing? And do you?
I do. Right, I used to when I was using my smartphone.
Yeah. Do you have your son take calls on the smartphone? Do you show him the phone and have people on there? Because I think about that a lot. How that changes how a child will interact with somebody that they see on a smartphone, and how does that change the way that they interact with the smartphone itself? And I'm sure we're not far enough along in smartphone use to have any kind of data on that, but I wonder about what kind of an effect that has on how we interact with people.
I'm not exactly sure where the data stands. I do know that in my own experience, I have allowed my son to, be on FaceTime with his grandparents or his cousins or his aunts and uncles. And I think in one sense, that's a really cool thing.
Right.
Like, he knows who they are, because some of my family are a 7-hour drive away. So we're only out there 2, maybe 3 times a year. And at a young age, he already was recognizing them from the fact that he knew these people on FaceTime.
And he's able to correlate those two.
Yes, and he figured that out pretty quickly, which impressed me.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's at a very young age. Like, he figured out, he's talking to these people, and he knows them from when he saw them at Christmas or something.
Right.
And he recognized them. There was a bit of a wake up call for me the other day. He has these little like blocks. Mm-hmm. They're like magnetic blocks that there's one particular size of them that is shaped a lot like the iPhone.
Yeah.
Just in smaller child size. And, you build with them or something. and he was walking around with it up to his ear and talking gibberish into it.
Right.
And then he pulled it out in front of him and, used his thumbs on it like it was a smartphone, like he
That's
was
adorable.
texting. And yeah, on the one hand, it's like, oh, that's super cute. On the other hand, it's like, oh no, he's just mimicking whatever we're doing.
Right.
So that happened, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago. And that has prompted some of my urgency with this challenge of like, how far can I go before it goes too far? Like I need to find that balance so that I can teach my son that balance properly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to raise my son to be anti-technology. Like
Right.
I work in tech. I do enjoy aspects of it. But I want him to carefully consider what he allows into his life.
Yeah. Well, I think I applaud you in that. I think one thing that's really interesting is in terms of the medium is the message. I mean, hold on. Let me slow down for a second. As we're going through this challenge, I think one of the things that's worth pointing out to folks who are listening, if they haven't already jumped to this conclusion, I think one of the benefits of doing this challenge, or one of the reasons that this challenge is worth doing, even if it's not doing the things that we might expect it to, or even if we're not super successful with it or whatever, I think it's really worth taking time to start to wrestle with what does our relationship with technology look like in really day-to-day, really tangible ways. Because as technology explodes and our ability to consume technology explodes, that's going to have tremendous implications for those of us who, are parents or hope to be parents one day, on how our children interact and how the youth of our church interact with technology. And I think about my own difficulties with different things came from a misunderstanding of what technology was, or a not understanding how to properly use it, or maybe how there were certain things where I think I knew more about technology than my parents did, and that really opened up a door for sin in a lot of ways, because I was able to take advantage of things that my parents didn't know about, that kind of a thing. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to think about some of these things and to really nurture in our children and in the youth of the church and in ourselves a mentality and an attitude towards technology, a technology that is quite consciously designed to increase production, to tap into literally the most lustful part of ourselves. The screen itself is voyeuristic. You're looking at something and you're desiring it. That's just literally what the design of a screen is made to do. I think we need to really, really think about how we use technology in a way that counteracts or countermands, or however you want to say, that fights against this all-consuming telos of technology, if I can use that word. I mean, one thing that I've been kind of pushing for in our house, with not a ton of success yet, is a desire for a record player. Speaking of digital media, I really want a record player, because I want to get in this habit of what's the word? Not collaborating, not collating, curating. That's the word I'm looking for. Of curating media, right? I want to have I want to develop a taste in something, like a connoisseur of wines. You curate this taste, you develop this taste.
So if you want to actually experience music, you should use CDs. This vinyl is cool, great stuff. CDs have much, much, much better sound quality, and you have a similar experience as far as the curating goes. So I'm just throwing that out there.
It's sort of. I think there's tangible differences, but this is not a listening to music podcast.
The CD literally sounds better. Period.
Well, it sounds
like there's no question of it.
It sounds cleaner.
Vinyls are scratchy. They have a great warmth to it.
But there's something to that.
They have a great warmth to it, but you can't hear every instrument. Sure,
that's not
there's something
That's
to
more
it.
of the sound system.
My point is, I don't think you need a record player to accomplish where you're going. No, no. The technology of how a record player works versus how a CD player works. It's literally reading the interface completely differently.
You know more about technology than I do, so I'll let you win this one.
Like, if you're gonna go medium is the message route, the CD allows you to hear every note and if it's well recorded and mixed and produced, it's going to be a much better listening experience. Vinyl, on the other hand, might give you a more nostalgic listening experience, which is perfectly fine. I'm just pointing out that if you're after like actually experiencing the music as it was intended, or like as you would hear it in the recording studio or in a live performance, the CD will give you that better option. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think what I'm looking for is more of a thoughtful listening experience, more so than
which a vinyl might get you there. Yeah,
right. Where it's like, okay, if I'm gonna go through all the effort of picking out a vinyl and setting up the record player, doing all this, I'm gonna sit down and listen to the music. Is that the best recording? Is that the best production of that song? Maybe not, but am I being deliberate with that? That's maybe more the goal. But it's a good point. I mean, there's a particular use for each of those things. I bring that all up because you and I think are both responding to a like over-consuming drive. Like we both feel this desire of like, oh, I need to go browse something. Like when I'm at home at night, my wife is like, let's watch TV. I'm like, great. And then I spend 20 minutes scrolling through Amazon trying to figure out what to watch just because I like to scroll. And maybe that's just a human. Maybe if I was, on DirecTV or whatever, or on basic cable.
And yet you were just talking about having your physical collection of movies.
Yes,
so there's
but
a
I don't
disconnect
own
here,
it.
Banjo.
I don't own.
I'm going to call you
that
out on
thing.
it.
Yeah, the movies I really love, I own.
Oh, sure,
but
fair enough.
But if I want to taste a movie, if I want a sample of a movie, I'll use the old free Amazon stuff.
So on that note, I think it's funny you use that language, like very sensual language, in referring to something that has been serviced to you to browse and then partake of at your own will and leisure.
Right.
Because you mentioned earlier a point about kind of the voyeurism of the internet. And it's something that we brought up initially when Ben Scoons was on last week about how not only does the internet contain pornography, but it is, in terms of the root word of pornography, it is pornographic in its presentation, the way it presents itself. It's all visual. Well, not all, but primarily visual medium and primarily meant to be consumed as an object. And that's something I don't know if I've mentioned this book. No, I mentioned it last week. Digital Liturgies by Samuel D. James. He has a whole chapter in here on that subject of consumption and how when we use the internet, we are more readily wiring ourselves to be consumptive, or I don't know if that's the right word for that, but to consume things by nature.
Right.
And so there's just a very fascinating point there about the medium of the internet, and specifically, especially social media.
Yeah.
Because I think there are certainly very good uses of the internet that are not actually quite that way. But it's more the way that social media is geared and designed to draw you in. So I just thought I'd throw that out there as an interesting.
Well, I think it's a good point. And one thing I've been interested in, I end up listening to a lot of celebrities on different podcasts and different things. I find them amusing from time to time. And one thing that has been interesting to hear them talk about at different points that I don't know if it's necessarily as like a common phenomenon, but definitely happens to celebrities and famous people. But they will talk about like a horrible thing will happen in their life, and then people don't react to them as people, they react to them as entertainment, and they pull their phones out. So George Clooney has this story about like he was in this terrible motorcycle accident, almost gets killed in this like crazy motorcycle car accident, whatever. And like nobody comes to help him. He's almost immediately surrounded by just an army of people carrying phones and trying to like video his last moments. Like that's basically the way that people responded to it. And I was struck by this again,
Man,
watching
that's wild.
not to bring it up twice in 2 episodes, but in the video of the attempted Trump assassination, you could see everybody was going for their phones. You know, nobody moved, nobody ran.
Well, some
except for
some were,
but mostly it was. I saw a lot of people reaching for cell phones. They wanted to record the moment, you know, and
a lot of people were. Yeah, a lot of people were. There were some in the crowd that were, you know, covering loved ones, and
for sure, not everybody.
But yeah, you're right. A lot of folks were. They were also doing it from a very cowering position. You can also see the journalists running up, like totally at without care for their own lives, like they're there to capture the moment. Which is there's something different about that in my head than about I'm going to capture this moment from behind a bleacher, you know.
Right. Well, that's the job.
There's something about that.
Is the job of the journalist to do that.
Right.
You know, but it's not our job. Right. You know, you talked about there's people who their first concern was of, you know, to their loved ones, right? Or to maybe strangers around them, just to protect a life. There wasn't that from the people who were there thinking, well, I got to record this moment. You know, I gotta put this on my social media feed, and I think that's different from.
This is gonna get me so many likes. Yeah,
I only bring it up because this is a new thing in human history that everybody has a phone. You know, jump back, I don't know, maybe 40 years ago, 30 years ago. I don't even say the last time we had an attempted presidential assassination with Reagan. Not everybody has a cell phone or a good quality camera to take that kind of a picture. And so your first reaction isn't going to be, oh, I need to record this. It's going to be much more, I think, I imagine, in the moment. And so I just think it's interesting the way that having immediate access to that kind of technology changes our reaction to a moment like that. And I think there's a great movie folks can check out, Nightcrawler, with, it's not Joaquin Phoenix, Jake Gyllenhaal. Nightcrawler, Jake Gyllenhaal is in it. It's a very good movie where he is a guy who records footage for media companies, for news channels, and he really starts to push the edge of. He finds out that people will really only buy his stuff, watch his stuff if it's graphic, if it's grisly, if it terrifies people, you know, if it's gonna draw in eyeballs, and he really starts to push on like what is okay to film, and what is okay to record, and what is truthful, and really in different ways, kind of staging different horrible situations so that he can sell his videos. And I think it's a movie worth watching because I think it does kind of call into question our own relationship with what we film, and does kind of maybe ask us to examine that a little bit. So I don't know. These are some things in the last couple of days, couple of weeks that I've been thinking about as we've been doing this challenge.
Yeah, I do think even beyond the conversation of the immediate desire to consume something through the lens of your phone so you can have it later. Even beyond that, you know, it's fascinating the desire to be, or the way you get caught up on your smartphone, just even in the news cycle. Like, I think that's something we both experienced over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Now, for me, it wasn't even on my smartphone. It was just on my laptop, but I was I was up late several nights, just refreshing feeds and trying to check on things. And, there's something about the gripping power of the way the news is presented on that, and the way it feels like it could, you know, it's minute by minute now. Like, we had videos within minutes.
I mean, second by second, some
of the
cases.
Attempted assassination. I mean, it's crazy how fast we can get it now. So, with that, like, it feels like, you know, it's kind of your traditional news media is, you know, it comes out a couple hours after something happens now, relative to how quickly social media gets something out there. So there's definitely questions about, it's cool that that's effective, and it's cool that we can spread the word about certain events very rapidly. On the other hand, it means we can more quickly jump to erroneous conclusions, or we can more quickly start spreading rumors that are not true. And we can also become overly consumed with the consumption of that. So there are definitely questions there about how we take it in doses. And one book I've been reading is Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, and he has a few ideas about how to approach that and how to approach even the news cycle. There are two. There was one major recommendation he gave, and then he gave several examples in this book. Folks in a study that he did. The major recommendation he had was actually, rather than going directly to your news feeds, use things like RSS subscriptions or email subscriptions to pick very specifically what feeds you want to be getting information from. And then as those come in throughout the week, he pens them or saves them to an app. There's several out there. Like one is Pocket that you can clip things to. There's a few others. And then he has this kind of weekly ritual of going to a coffee shop on a Saturday morning for about an hour or two and reading through the articles he saved. So there's a very intentional time of consumption of this like personal newspaper that he's curated from some of the headlines that he's seen come through his inbox or his RSS feed or something. Or even while he's browsing, you can clip an article while you're browsing. And then kind of on the more extreme end, you've got, he said, several students that he was asked to partake in a study going through digital minimalism found that they couldn't even handle that. So they just got a literal physical newspaper subscription. And that's how they got their news.
I love that.
Which those still exist. I was looking it up today. They still exist. You can still get a physical subscription. So that's cool. Anyway, that was a lot thrown out there, kind of running through the news to how we consume it to better ways to consume it. And then I'm sure you have some thoughts on that, and then it'll be about time for us to wrap up.
Well, not really, except for, I've mentioned several times on here, Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. He talks about the what now, or the now this principle in he's talking about TV news, but it applies, at an exponential rate to our situation where, he was talking about a news channel will say, 3 people died today in a bus accident in Queens, and now this, and it'll be something like, rubber duck sales have dropped precipitously since June. It'll be like these two things that are just totally unrelated, totally, one is shocking and one is banal. And to have them presented side by side in the same sphere is disorienting and desensitizing, because we're basically being told these are equal. These are the same thing. They are equal in our eyes, so they should be equal in yours. They're both equally gripping. And when you shift that to a YouTube Shorts page where you're doing that on a loop, basically at an exponentially higher level, it just gets crazier.
That makes sense. I do think there is one sense in which that's a little bit true of life, where you could be walking down the street one minute, there's a homeless guy laid out. You might be close to death. You don't know. And the next, you're walking by the most luxurious set of hotels that you've ever seen. It's just, that happens in life a little bit. And, if you spend much time in the outdoors, you will see life played out in front of you multiple times a day.
That's
right.
That's
so that there is a sense of, like, I think that's a little bit true to life. I think also there's a sense of the bygone era of journalism, of everything was, not everything, but a lot of things were presented a little bit, like you read like clippings from World War II, and it's very matter of fact. And I think there's a sense of which at a certain point in time, journalists tried to simply be matter of fact. If you go listen to like Walter Cronkite, he has the same tone for so many things. And like, there's only a few times he ever kind of breaks his tone, and those are like the most serious moments.
Yeah, this is what anyway. Postman is talking about is a little bit different. I mean, to talk about, it's a good example. It's a good contrast between, like there's the homeless guy on the street, and then you walk past like, a luxury apartment. In life, you do have those moments, But those moments will probably cause you cognitive dissonance, right? An aware person will have cognitive dissonance between those two things and be like, oh, how is it possible that this person is here and this, amazing millionaire lives here? Like, how are those two things possible? And you'll probably feel some internal pain over that. Compare that to, something in a sports era, in a news channel where you'll have 3 people died in a car accident and the Knicks lost. And those things are presented in a way that doesn't cause you any cognitive dissonance. Because if it caused you cognitive dissonance, you change the channel, right? So those things have to be presented in a way
that's fair.
And so that desensitizes us to those things, because there's a way that is presented that dehumanizes the situation, because it has to. Otherwise, we would be kind of in shock and terror at the situation. So that's the difference there. And now take that idea in a newsroom and now just apply that to the internet, where everything is like that.
I see what you're saying. I think I'd have to think about it a little further. And maybe it's because I haven't necessarily had that cognitive dissonance when scrolling through YouTube Shorts, that I'm not really thinking about it. It's interesting when you frame it that way, though. I'll be thinking about that this week. As we wrap up here, is there anything going into this week that you particularly want to change or address or do in relation to this challenge?
I'm always trying to think of something different to add on, but I don't think I have anything in particular. I think it's just going to be kind of keeping with it, trying to be more consistent. Probably trying to get to 7 out of 7. It's going to be my main goal, especially when it comes to spending time with family and loved ones and stuff like that. Just being kind of really deliberate in setting aside that time. How about you? Are there things you're going to be doubling down on, focusing on?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I've really noticed is without having the smartphone at all, how much time I freed up for myself, and finding ways to use that time well has actually been a bit of a challenge, because my desire is to go find something to browse, or I want to play something on my phone or whatever it is. And so then I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I could open up my laptop and find a new site to browse, but then that's more obvious. Like, it's less like I have to sit somewhere and intentionally do that. And so it's more obvious to myself that, I'm deciding to do this. So then I found other things to do. In the last week, I've read 2-3 books in the last week.
Nice.
So that's been good. I think this week it's going to be try to spend more intentional time with my family, especially in the evenings, when often I am just simply distracted and not necessarily paying attention to the life that my children are living. So I think that's going to be a big focus for me. In terms of practical things to do, one thing I did was I bought a cheap MP3 player.
Oh, really?
So I'm going to, bought a cheap MP3 player, loaded a bunch of the CDs I owned onto it. So that's been fun, exploring that, figured out some ways to get podcasts onto it. So I'm going to experiment with that a bit this week and see how that goes. Hopefully it's not too annoying. I think that's been the number one thing I've missed from the smartphone, which, again, this challenge is not about ditching the smartphone entirely, but if you choose to do that, you're going to miss music and podcasts the most, in my experience. Like, the social media, on the one hand, like, while there's the draw, I'm not mad that it's gone.
Right.
The music and the podcasts, like, I live with my music and my podcasts. I don't know. So that's been the toughest thing to figure out how to replace. I did discover that we have got some fun local radio stations, though. So
isn't radio fun?
I had nothing else to do on a drive the other day. Yeah. I caught the end of a Braves game. That was fun.
I love baseball on the radio. That is excellent.
It was good. Yeah. Well, anyway, that was a lot thrown out there. I'm excited. We've got, I guess, 2 weeks left in this challenge. So as a reminder, challenges last for 6 weeks. We have 2 weeks left here. They are simple daily tasks to grow us as young men, young Christian men. And the current challenge is to simply turn your phone completely off for 1 hour every day.
This has been the Forging Honor podcast. Music and production is by Elliot George. For more information about what we do or to learn how to get involved, visit our website at forginghonor.com. There you'll find information about our community, the Forge, and how to join other young men seeking to glorify God in thought, word, and deed. You'll also find blog articles, book recommendations, and more ways to grow as a Christian man.
If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend or family member about Forging Honor. We would also appreciate it if you would take a moment to like and subscribe. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, a rating and review only takes a moment, and it goes a long way towards growing the Forging Honor community.
Thanks for taking the time with us today. We hope you'll take up the work alongside us and join us in the task of Forging Honor. We'll see you next time.